everybody is there all the time, click, 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 with your phone, with your camera. Everything goes on social media. I think we kind of have to rein it in a bit, and we have to think a bit more carefully about what impact we're having on the people in the communities that we're visiting.
Welcome to the SheClicks Women in Photography podcast. I'm Angela Nicholson, and I'm the founder of SheClicks, which is a community for female photographers. In these podcasts, I talk with women in the photographic industry to hear about their experiences, what drives them, and how they got to where they are now. This episode is with Bella Falk, whose childhood love of photography dovetails perfectly with her passion for travel and led to a colourful life as a travel photographer, documentary director, writer and creator of the acclaimed travel website passportandpixels.com. She's won or been a finalist in more than 30 travel industry awards, and her work has appeared in National Geographic Traveller, BBC Travel and Lonely Planet, amongst others. Hi Bella, thank you so much for joining me today on the SheClicks Women in Photography podcast. It's really lovely to see you.
It is lovely to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. So can we kick things off by hearing about what first piqued your interest in photography when you were a child?
Well, goodness me, we're going back a few years, maybe more years than I care to admit now. I don't know if I have an answer to that. I was quite artistically minded as a child, and I did then go on to do art GCSE and art A-level. And, you know, in the mediums that you can choose to use when you're doing art, photography was one of the options that I chose. And at school, I would bring a camera into class and I would take pictures, and I joined the Photography Society and I did a darkroom club. And I think my parents kind of encouraged all of that. So, you know, birthdays and things, I'd get given pinhole cameras and various other little kits and bits and bobs. I just think I enjoyed the creativity of it. And obviously I'm quite a creative person, so it just fed into that. I was never very kind of good artistically in the kind of flair of art. Like, you know, there are some people who can just splash paint around and make something beautiful, and I'm not very good at that. I was sort of capturing things in a different way. It was sort of more definitely what I was better at, I think. So
yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I think I feel quite the same, actually. I mean, I loved art at school, but photography, I find that somehow an easier process, I suppose. It works for me. So neither of your parents was a photographer?
No, my parents liked to take family photos, like obviously many parents do. And my mother would make photo albums. So there's lots of old, you know, this was obviously the era of printing them out and sticking them in. So I remember that happening between the ages of about 11 and about 25. I was so self-conscious about the way that I looked that I refused to have my photograph taken. So I would always then prefer to be on the other side of the camera, almost as a way of getting out of having to be in the shot. And so there might have been something in that as well.
Yeah, that is a good way of getting out of a lot of photography, isn't it? Or getting out the photos. Just I'll do the photography.
Yeah.
When did you start to combine photography with travel?
Well, I started travelling on my own straight after school. I took the proverbial gap year, and I went to South America. And at that stage, I just had a sort of point and squirt camera, as I would have called it, a compact, and, you know, really enjoyed using it. Came home, made albums. But I think I found it frustrating because the pictures were never as good as I wanted them to be. So after I got back, that's when I got my first film SLR, and, you know, was leaning much more into, you know, how can I get the images that I can see other people are doing, because what I'm getting with this little thing is not enough. It's not good enough. And you're just always striving to be better and kind of evolve and mimic, or, you know, try and do my best to mimic the professionals or the better shots that I could see. And yeah, it kind of grew from there.
How did you feel about the move from film to the digital photography?
I was very keen. I'm always a bit of a late adopter. I didn't get my first mobile phone until long after everybody else had. I really resisted that change, and the same with smartphones. So lots of people had digital, you know, long before I did, and I was quite happy with my film camera. But there came a point with film where, you know, just the hassle of having to go and get the prints and the restrictions of only being able to take 36 photos before you then had to, you know, change the film, and that gets expensive. Obviously digital the shots are free basically once you've got your card, and you can try and practice and as long as you want, and you get results instantly. So I know there's lots of people who are, you know, still very passionate about film, but for me digital is just, you know, it's absolutely brilliant, and I would never go back.
I'm exactly the same. I remember when I was thinking about buying my first digital SLR, I sat down and I added up roughly how many rolls of film I'd used over the last year. And as soon as I did that, I thought, I need to buy a digital camera because it was going to save me a fortune.
Yeah, there's definitely obviously there's the cost side of it, but it's also just I love the fact that I can take an image and then I can see if I got what I wanted, and if I didn't, I can do it again. And you can play. You can be like, oh, I'll just try this, and if it doesn't work, you can delete it, and that I think pushes your creativity as well.
Do you enjoy editing your images?
Up to a point, yes. I think when it's down to me and it's like I just want to play with this, and I love when I come back from a trip, particularly if it's a wildlife photography trip, going through and looking at the images that I've got. And it's a really great way to kind of revisit the destination and the things that you did. And even a year or 2 or 5 years later, you can sometimes go back and it sort of brings all those memories back, which I love. I less enjoy, when you're kind of on a deadline and you've got to submit, particularly if you're working with I don't know, like if it's a hotel or something, and you've just got to give them 50 images to choose from of interiors of the hotel, whatever that might be. That's less exciting, and it's just got to be done, and then it gets a bit boring.
Are you really good at keywording your images and sort of organizing them properly?
No, I think I'm quite good. My folder structure is solid, so I can always find something if it's the destination, because I've got a pretty good memory for obviously where I went and when. It gets harder the further back I go. It's like if I'm looking for a picture from Cuba, what year did I go to Cuba? Or that can be harder, but they're easy enough to find if you just search for Cuba in the file structure. I have tried to get better at keywording animals, because I shoot a lot of wildlife, and sometimes it's like, oh, where was that photo of the lion? And particularly if I can generally remember that lion was in that location, but I might have been in that place for 5 days. And at this point, I'll have a folder for every morning game drive and every afternoon game drive or whatever. Otherwise you end up with folders with thousands of images. So the last few trips I've been quite good about keywording. And then it does really help if you're like, oh, I want to find the warthog baby photo. You can just put in warthog baby and it'll just pop up. I should do that more, but it's quite time consuming and a bit dull.
Yeah. I wish I was better. I'm investigating some AI assistance, I think, for keywording. Fingers crossed that'll really help out soon. As you mentioned, you photograph wildlife, you photograph locations. When you're planning a trip, is it the location or the species that is the biggest draw?
It slightly depends on the trip. I mean, because obviously I'm doing a lot of this for work. Some of it, it has a more of financial, motivation. If I'm honest, if people are going to pay me well and it doesn't sound like a terrible time, I'll go. Or not just a terrible time, but I also, I do like to be quite picky about who I work with, in terms of sustainability and responsible tourism. I don't particularly want to work with big giant hotel chains or anything like that. I'd rather work with smaller organizations and people who kind of need the help, I think. But then, if it's down to me, it's either places that I've already been that I just love, like, basically anywhere in East Africa or Southern Africa, or species that I haven't seen before, places that I've heard really great things about but never been. I'm very keen to go to Japan and see the snow monkeys, for example. So yeah, kind of sometimes it can be just, if I'm not really busy at that time and an offer pops up and I'll be like, well, that sounds fun. So I don't do a great deal when I'm at home. I don't have kids or anything like that. So I like to be away. If I sit around at home for too long, I start to get a bit twitchy.
So how much of your time, roughly, do you spend away from home?
It can really depend. So I was away a lot at the end of last year and the start of this year. I had 4 almost back-to-back trips I went to Kenya, then I went to the States, then I went to Botswana, and then I went to Palau, which was a very random, and that was just an offer. I'd never thought of going to Palau, and then Nat Geo Traveller said, did I want to go? And I was like, well, sure, great.
Do now.
Yeah. And it was fabulous. It was fabulous. But then after I got back from Palau, I did turn a couple of things down because at that point I was a little bit burnt out and I was quite tired and I just wanted to be in my space for a bit and, go to the gym and have my routine and see my friends and so on. But now I've been back since February. It's now mid-April, end of April, and I'm going away again soon, so I'm quite pleased about that.
Getting itchy feet.
Yeah.
So is most of your work commissioned? So you get a commission and then you plan the trip and travel, or do you pitch ideas to people as well and then plan a trip around it?
It's a bit of both. I sometimes have ideas and pitch. So the Botswana trip sort of came out of an idea and then got bigger and bigger and bigger, because I just went, well, if I'm going to be in Botswana, I might as well do this and this and this and this, and then pitching a lot and seeing what sticks and where you end up. And then other times I might get a press trip invite, but the press trip invites are generally reliant upon a commission. So you'll get the invite, but they won't actually confirm your place on the trip until you've got a commission. So the pictures are then inspired by what's on the itinerary and, what do I think this publication might be interested in. And then you have to do it that way, which can be a bit frustrating because sometimes editors can take a while to get back to you. And in the meantime, the PR is saying, we need to book the flights. Are you coming or not? And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. What is a typical press trip for you?
Well, my dream, the ones that I love Africa, obviously, or wildlife. So I'm going next month, I'm going with the Alberta Tourism Board to look at sort of ancient and modern wildlife in Alberta. So that means a few days of going to the Badlands to look at dinosaur fossils, which I'm actually really interested in and really excited about. And then once we've sort of seen the paleontologists digging up some dinosaur bones, we're going to go to Jasper National Park, which I have been to before and is so beautiful, and we'll drive around and hopefully see some wildlife there as well. So that's really lovely. But then after that, I'm doing a Nile cruise, which I'm not really big into cruising. Again, they're not, cruises are a bit controversial sometimes. I think river cruising is possibly, the on the sort of better end for me in terms of the size of the boats and the numbers of people and so on. But again, I'm really interested in archaeology and paleontology, and I've never done a Nile cruise, and it is one of those things that has always been on my bucket list to go and see, particularly not just, I've been to Egypt and I've seen the pyramids, but all those other bits of Egyptian history that are a bit further down the river that I've never been to. So
do you ever go to a place and take photographs, come back and then pitch?
I did that with Guatemala. So a couple of years ago, I was working on a documentary about the ancient Maya civilization, and I was supposed to go on a shoot. This was during COVID, and just about a week before the shoot, I caught COVID, and I couldn't go. So I was extremely upset about that. And this was I was working from home, obviously, and this was the time when you basically weren't allowed to leave the country unless you had a work reason. And so I'm very upset. And then I was like, well, after this is finished, I've just got to go. I'm not going to miss all of the chances to see all these places and meet the people that I've been, speaking to on Zoom for so long. So it was about another year of doing the edit and being allowed to leave the country. And then eventually I went to Guatemala on my own. It just, again, as a kind of, look, I just need to get out and travel. And I chose Guatemala partly for that reason, but also partly because I was thinking, what can I pitch that will be very photogenic and maybe doesn't feel like it's been done so much before. And Guatemala felt like a country that I hadn't seen in the press that much. So I went, and I paid for it all myself, obviously. And now, since then, I've had so many commissions and sold so many images, and Guatemala was a really, really good choice for me. And I've definitely earned the cost of the trip back and then some. So, it was really good. But generally now, because, I'm sort of known and I get offers of work, I'm more often, I wait for the invite and then I go, because travel is expensive, as you know, and photography doesn't pay very well, as you also know. And it's very hard to make the cost of the trip back if you're paying your own way.
Yeah. Do you ever get commissioned purely for your photography, or is it always a bundle with words as well?
So far, it's always been a bundle with words. I am in conversations at the moment about possibly going out to work with a hotel brand to photograph. They offer it's sort of hotels and tours and experiences as well. I did in October last year, the Kenya trip. That was with a company that just wanted me to photograph and video their experience, because that was a new company. They're called Walking Wild Africa. And it was this lady, she's just a small independent tour operator, and she didn't have much on her website in the way of content, and she wanted to revamp her website and start upping her social media game. So I went out there to do one of her trips and capture everything, and then just delivered her this big package of content, which then she's now using all over her social media and her website and whatever, so that now when people book, they can really see what they're going to get.
Yeah, that sounds like a really rewarding thing to do, to take a small organisation and really help them, show them what they do.
Yeah, actually, I'm really glad that I did that. No, because she's lovely and the company's lovely. In fact, she decided after I did that she was going to donate all of the profits from those tours to charity. So that she does other things. So she's a travel agent, and so she makes her living doing that. And then these tours, she's going to run a few a year, and they're all going to be not for profit. So it's really nice to have been able to help. And it's obviously a great shop window for me because her website, even if I do so myself, and the web designer also takes a lot of credit, but the website looks absolutely beautiful now. And I'm hoping that means that I can then show this to other organisations and be like, this is what I can offer and help you with.
Did the writing come as naturally to you as the photography?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I was always a good student. I was good at English. Similarly, as a child, I would write stories for fun because, clearly I was very cool. I had a very good and inspirational English teacher in secondary school, and was always encouraged. I did English A-level, and being a writer was kind of something that was possibly something that I thought I would do. And when I thought I was going to go into journalism, print journalism might have been an option. And I did at university, I did the student radio station and the student newspaper. And then my journalism path just sort of ended up with me being in television rather than in print. But, at the school age, I could have possibly gone either way.
Yeah. Now, you're also a producer, a director, and an editor. How do you combine all those various strands of your business?
With difficulty. It's like most freelancers in the creative industries, I have a portfolio career because you can't necessarily rely on one thing giving you consistent work all the time. TV, was consistent for 20 years, but has now, is also changing, and the jobs are getting shorter, the contracts are getting shorter or fewer. It's still a very, very competitive industry, and it's not an industry always that rewards longevity. So it's almost as though the older I get, the harder it gets. Young, new people with fresh ideas are coming in, and they're cheaper, and they've got possibly more energy. And I'm still quite energetic. So, that can be challenging. But I also love the photography and I love the writing, and I don't want to just pick one because, I'm good at all of it and I enjoy all of it and I like the variety. So it's just difficult really to juggle in my diary because you never quite know when something's going to happen. And I've got this at the moment where a TV company is saying, oh, are you available on these dates? Because we think we might have something, but it's not confirmed. So then I'm trying to keep those dates free, but then something else comes up and I'm like, well, I want to accept this because it's a bird in the hand, but actually the TV job is a longer project and will pay better. And trying to kind of manage that is really hard.
Yeah. It always seems to be feast and famine as well, doesn't it, with those sort of things? They all come along at the same time, or people start to approach you about something and you really have no idea of the time frame.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I've had some quiet time here, which has been really good, and I've been pitching. Mm-hmm. The problem is, as well, with pitching is that you pitch a lot of stuff and then you might not hear back and you don't know if it's going to land or not. And then suddenly 4 or 5 people suddenly get back to you having not replied for weeks and go, yes. And you're like, oh,
yeah. How soon can you do it? You said when you first started travelling, you travelled alone when you left school. Do you still travel alone quite a lot?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I don't have a partner, so I don't have someone easily on hand to grab to go away with, and friends occasionally. But again, it's hard. People's diaries are hard, and lots of my friends have got kids. So mainly, I travel alone, or as I say, press trips, and which tends to be small groups of other journalists all travelling together, which is quite nice. It's quite a sociable thing. But from a photography point of view, solo is better because then, you can wait for the perfect image, or you're not, being hassled by the tour guide to get back on the bus or whatever. But it also has its downsides, from a safety point of view, from a social point of view. So, I'm kind of on the fence.
Do you have any safety tips for travelling alone?
Oh, goodness me. I mean,
how many, should I say?
And I wrote a whole blog post about safety in Guatemala because it was one of the things that was really worrying me before I went. You hear a lot about, oh, don't go to Central America, it's super dangerous. And, and I'm blonde and I was carrying all of this expensive camera gear and everybody was saying, you're going to get robbed and it's going to be terrible. And I was very anxious before I went. And, and I had a great time and it was totally fine. And I walked around with my camera out and took pictures of people. And I remember that the first day I got there, walking around with my camera and I had it in my bag and I was so nervous about taking it out, and I would just get it out and take a picture and then put it back again. And I was like, this is not going to work. I can't do this for the next 3 months. You just have to kind of, get used to it. But, the safety rules generally, I'm quite a sensible person and I'm not going to do things like get raging drunk and get into a car with a stranger, or even, particularly if I'm traveling on my own, I'm not going to go out after dark on my own. I'm not going to hike on my own. I do get my camera out, but I'm sort of quite aware of my environment. And maybe I've been lucky, bad things do happen, but also lots of people travel and have a lovely time and nothing happens. So
are you careful about telling people where you're going or what time you'll be back and that kind of thing?
When I'm traveling on my own, no. I just, if I'm in a hostel or whatever, I'll just go. But I do tend to book group trips. So I'll either travel on my own. So Guatemala I did go by myself, but I also quite like sort of group tours where you travel, you go there by yourself, but then you have a group and a guide, which is not really solo travel, but you can go on your own. Or when I'm in a destination, maybe I will just join a day tour or something like that. Because apart from anything else, just getting around, if you're on your own, sometimes you can be waiting hours for buses or just you don't even know. It takes so long to figure this stuff out. You're sort of like, I'm a bit like, I'm here, I want to do the thing. Yeah. I don't want to spend hours reading bus timetables or looking for the bus station. So I don't, but I would never tell the hostel reception, I'm going to be back at this time. I don't think anyone does that, do they? Maybe they do.
I don't know, but maybe somebody does. This tends to be advice when you're hiking through, I don't know, the Scottish Highlands and things like that.
Yeah, I don't hike. If I do hike on my own, I don't go very far and I don't go off the beaten trails. I'm always so worried about getting lost. I'm not particularly great at navigating on my own. So certainly for hiking, I would go with a group or a guide.
So you're going to be talking at the Amateur Photographer Magazine's Festival of Outdoor Photography in London at the end of May. What are you going to be speaking about?
I am going to be speaking about ethical and responsible travel photography.
Okay.
I'm not going to tell anybody what they shouldn't do, because I'm not an expert either, but just more giving you things to think about, because I think travel photography has evolved so much now, from the days when travel photographers were quite few and far between and they would take, a few photos on a roll of film and then it might be published in a magazine, to today when everybody is there all the time, click, 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 with your phone, with your camera, everything goes on social media. I think we kind of have to rein it in a bit and we have to think a bit more carefully about what impact we're having on the people in the communities that we're visiting.
It's not just your trip, is it? Because your work often encourages more people to go. And therefore, so there's that kind of, come and see this amazing rare species. And then suddenly everybody's trampling all around it. It's quite a difficult balance.
It is a difficult balance. And I certainly don't have all the answers. But I guess it's just to try and get people to think about it a little bit more. Because I think maybe people don't even consider, it's just me. I'm just taking one photo. But then if 30 people have already done that day, it's a cumulative effect, as you say.
Yeah. So which day are you going to be speaking?
Friday morning.
Okay, great stuff. Okay, well, look forward to that. That's a really good time to go to 6 from SheClicks. I've got 10 questions from SheClickers and I'd like you to answer 6 questions by picking numbers from 1 to 10. So if you could give me your first number, please.
I'm going to do this totally randomly. 9.
Number 9. This is a good one. What would your work colleagues on a project say are your best qualities? That question is from Liz.
Oh, goodness me. Well, I'll tell you a story that the assistant producer who I worked with on the Guatemala documentary that I then didn't go on the shoot with, he went with a different director in the end. But when he was assigned to me, and we did all of this by Zoom, so I met him on Zoom and we worked together via Zoom for weeks before I met him in person. And he said to me, I'm so excited to be doing this job. I really wanted to work with you, Bella. And I was like, it's just trying to suck up, Serena. And I said, really, why is that? And he said, well, I saw you in the office one time and you were on the phone and you were really going at someone. But in a polite way, but in a very firm way. And I was like, and he said, oh, well, she's a badass. I don't think he said badass, and I don't actually like that word, but, she's clearly somebody who gets stuff done and she knows what she's doing. And, I respect that. And he wanted to work with me because of that. So that's one thing. Yeah, I certainly do get things done.
Great. That's nice. Tenacious.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Sounds good. All right. Can I have your second number, please?
4.
Number 4. You've won a lot of awards or been a finalist many times. Which recognition of your work means the most to you and why? That question is from Helen.
Ooh. This changes because sometimes, I really enjoy being recognised for my photography. So probably the one that I'm proudest of is winning Best Photography at the Travel Media Awards in 2020, which is annoyingly the one year when they didn't have a fancy awards ceremony because it was COVID.
Yeah.
I was nominated in 2019 and I didn't win. And I was nominated again in, I think, 2022 and I didn't win. In 2022, the year that I did win, no fancy awards do. I didn't get to go up on stage and accept my little glass thing. But then sometimes because I enter the writing categories and the photography categories and the blogging categories, which is how I end up with so many nominations because I'm doing all the different things. And then if I get a photography nomination but not a writing one, then I'm like, but what about my writing? So I'm never quite satisfied.
Okay. All right. Can I have your third number, please?
I'm going to go 3.
What is the most challenging project you've worked on and why? And that question's from Marianne.
Oh, gosh. I mean, are we talking photography or television? Because television is always very challenging.
Well, I guess it could be either.
I mean, again, just because I guess it's front of my mind, but that Maya Guatemala documentary was the reason it was so challenging, obviously, was because of COVID. And we were trying to set up this shoot across 3 different countries. So it was supposed to be filming in Mexico and then Guatemala and then Honduras. So we were trying to cross borders during COVID, which meant, trying to work out where are you going to get a PCR test in Copan in Honduras before you cross back into, and even just a lot of our budget got swallowed up ridiculously when we went to Mexico. The rules where you got to Mexico, you had to be in quarantine for, I think it was a week before you were allowed to leave your hotel. So that was, paying for people's time, paying for hotels. Our budget got absolutely decimated by that kind of stuff. And that meant obviously less money to spend on the filming and on screen. And that meant trying to work out the schedule and how can we shoot everything that we need in fewer days. And then, and then at one point Mexico closed all of its borders, and then we were suddenly like, oh, well, all of these stories we were going to film in Mexico, let's see, can we do them in Belize instead? So then I had to do a load of research about the Maya in Belize and then come up with some proposals, and then Mexico reopened their borders, and then the head of the Mexican Archaeology Authority died of COVID.
No.
So all of the archaeology departments and everything, all of the access that we were going to get, they were like, right, no, absolutely nothing's happening now. We were told we couldn't go again. So it was on and off and on and off. So that's again why when we finally got it all sorted out, and it was 10 days before the shoot, we were actually going, and then I caught COVID. Are you joking?
Gosh, yeah. Was there no point before that you thought, let's just do it some other time?
That decision's never up to me,
Okay.
Because the production company had the commission from the channel to make the film, and we were just, my job was to get it done. As I said, like Tenacious, you just gotta find a way, and they're pretty good about being realistic. So nobody's going to go, no, you give them the choice, don't you? Like, if you really want us to go to Mexico and do this, you're going to have to wait because now the borders are closed, or we can offer you this alternative. But yeah, you just got to keep going.
So it was basically, that came down to a whole heap of logistics, that more problems than normal, but it's logistics rather than the subject or the method you were employing for the filming.
In that case. I mean, we had a sort of similar issue earlier, just before I started doing that project, where I made some films about some archaeological sites in Turkey. And one particular one, the actual archaeology team were from a university in the south of Italy. And when we were trying to film there, we obviously wanted to interview them because it's their project. But because it was COVID, again, this was in sort of August of 2020, we couldn't get them from Italy. I think the rules were that they were not able to come. And so then we had this problem of, well, we've got to find other people to interview. But they were not happy at all about us interviewing other people about their work. And we were like, well, this is published work and other archaeologists can comment on it. It's not like we're revealing anything secret that hasn't already been in the press. And we can understand that you want to be there to talk about your own thing, but we can't get you there. So what are we going to do? And then they were like, well, why don't you just come to Italy and interview us, in our offices in Italy? But that wasn't like the format of the show involved people actually walking around the archaeological sites. Then it got a bit political. There's quite a lot of politics in the world of archaeology. You have to be quite careful of.
Okay, worth knowing. Sorry, can I have your fourth number, please?
What have we not done? 5.
Number 5. Now this follows on from the other question about awards. How important to you are photo awards, and how do you decide which to enter? That question's from Philippa.
I think awards are actually a really great way of getting notice. If it's a sort of smaller awards thing, I don't tend to enter the big ones, mostly because a lot of them charge quite a lot of money to enter. And I have entered in the past, and after a while you're a bit like, look, what's the point? Maybe I don't have the confidence to think that I'm actually going to win. So, and I've been shortlisted a few times. The only paid one that I still enter is the Wildlife Photographer of the Year. just because I am, such a passionate wildlife photographer, and because it's a bit of a bee in my bonnet that I've got about that one. I just really want to get a photo in the exhibition. And I have been shortlisted 5 times, 6 times. And every time you get that email, you're like, oh my God, and it's such a buzz. And I don't know, I'm sure they must shortlist, obviously, people, because the more people they shortlist, the more it encourages you to enter the next year. And, then you're going to pay your fee. But it's also quite a reasonable cost. You pay £25 or £30, I think it is now, to enter 25 images. So it's not that bad. There are other ones where you pay per image, or, and you're paying, £20 an image or something. That I just, it can add up really quickly.
Yeah, that adds up quickly. But like you say, Wildlife Photographer of the Year, that is a whopper of a competition, but it's the most fabulous exhibition and book as well. So yeah, if you're in there, then what a fabulous reward. I think it is one to go for.
100%. But the smaller ones, the most of the awards that I get nominated for are kind of travel media ones and UK ones. I think I did get an image in the British Wildlife Photographer of the Year book a couple of years ago. I didn't buy the book in the end, but that was, it's nice. And Travel Photographer of the Year, I used to enter, but again, that's quite an expensive one, so I don't anymore. And partly with that, I feel as well that, and this is totally justified, the people who win are generally, they're based in these locations, and they're the people who can go out every day in whatever light, or they can wait for the perfect light, and they can get, the incredible shots. And because I live in West London, which is basically grey and concrete, my travels are I don't travel as much as people who live in these destinations. And you have to get very lucky to get a really amazing award-winning travel image, on a 1-week trip to somewhere. It can happen. But I think, and I see the people that win, these incredible local photographers, and are absolutely, great. They deserve it. They're going out every day, and they're really honing their craft on their one specialist subject that they're doing every day, so.
In their defence, somebody in London can take photographs in London that qualify as travel photography.
Of course, you're absolutely right. You can. And I maybe should, but I don't know, because I live here, it just doesn't feel the same.
Yeah. And yeah, maybe not your kind of wildlife.
No. Okay. But I say that to people as well. I say, you must get out and practice. And I do go to Richmond Park to photograph the deer, and I do occasionally go out with my camera. But I think also because I travel so much, and then I end up coming home with thousands of images to edit. When I get home, the last thing I want to do is pick up my camera and go straight out again.
Fair enough. All right. So can I have your penultimate number, please?
10. Number
10. Is there any place or animal you'd be very happy to never travel to or see again? That's from Marianne. She says, a slight twist on the bucket list type question.
Goodness me, never again. How do I don't know. I don't want to say it's without offending anybody.
Well, maybe it could have been some experience in that place or with that particular animal, I suppose, rather than the place itself.
Well, I went to Dubai a long time ago. I didn't love Dubai.
Mm-hmm.
I went to visit some friends. This was many, many years ago. But I'm not going to say I would never go to Dubai again, because I'm sure there are parts of Dubai, if you can get out of the malls and the air-conditioned cars and the shopping centres, then I'm sure there's lovely bits of that area that are great.
It's not in your top 5, shall we say?
It's not in my top 5. No, I certainly got a top 25. I'm sure there are. But I'm sort of also very much of the opinion that, one bad experience in one place does not then mean that the whole place is terrible. I haven't had particularly brilliant times in India. I've been twice. I find it very chaotic. And the mindset of the Indian culture is just so completely different from my very British, punctual, this is how things work, let's get stuff done, mindset that I was filming in India on one occasion, and I did find it incredibly difficult to kind of stick to my schedule. So that was really hard. But that said, I'm definitely not saying I would never go to India again, because I've never seen a tiger, and I would really, really, really love to do that.
That's quite a draw.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so your last number, please.
2.
Number 2. You do so much. How do you fit it all in? It's a serious question. Do you compartmentalise the different facets of your business, and how do you allocate time to the various projects? So we kind of touched on this, but I think this person is thinking on a day-to-day basis. This is from Philippa, by the way.
Hello, Philippa. Thank you for your question. I don't do much else, if I'm honest. As I mentioned, I don't have a partner and I don't have kids, and I live by myself. So, and I've somehow turned my hobby into my job, which means I now don't have any hobbies. So kind of all I do is work. And I know that might sound really sad, but I have friends and I go out occasionally, but when I'm at home in my little flat, literally all I do is I go to the gym for an hour every day. And then apart from that, all I do is work. And I'm not very good at kind of organising long, sort of thinking that far ahead. I don't sort of diarise anything. I just kind of do what's the most pressing thing. And if I haven't got anything pressing, I'll do what's the thing that I'm interested in doing next. And if I haven't really got anything, I'm very, very good at procrastinating, but productively procrastinating. So if there's a thing that I have to do that I can't really be bothered to do, I'll do something else useful to get out of doing the thing. Even my procrastination is productive, yeah. So yeah, I do whatever's the most important thing. And I'm also not very good at having things hanging over me. So if I've got something to do, I'm never somebody who's going to leave it until the last minute. I had a writing deadline to write about this hike that I did in Kenya last year. So it's one that I mentioned with this Walking Wild Africa. The article isn't even going to be published until 2026. And the editor said, oh, you can send it to me sometime towards the end of the year. And I was like, well, I'll just do it now because then I don't have to think about it anymore. And you never know what's going to happen in the future or what is going to come up. And I don't want to suddenly get to near the end and suddenly be rushing to get it done. And I'd rather do it while it's fresh. So I just kind of consistently keep going.
Is there a risk, though, that something major will happen, maybe something political or something, and they have to say, right, you're going to have to add that in to whatever you've written because there's a major change?
Yes, possibly. Then they might pull it and I won't get paid until it's published. And, I did spend a few days or a couple of days writing it, but I don't know. I mean, I wanted to get it done while it was fresh in my head. I think otherwise it would be harder in a year's time to even remember. I mean, I have notes, but...
Yeah. No, I mean, it might just be a paragraph change anyway, but...
Yeah, well, I mean, they might put it, if Kenya suddenly, has a civil war and you can't go to Kenya anymore, then they might not want to run the story, but hopefully that won't happen.
When you're working on a project, say you're away, working on a documentary or something like that, are you 100% focused on that? Or do you allow a little bit of time to think about the next project and start planning? Or do you work in very discrete bubbles?
I do tend to be very focused on what I'm doing, which is almost in a way how I kind of ended up doing all of this other stuff on the side. Because when I was doing TV 100% of the time, well, not 100% of the time, but as my full-time job, you'd be so focused on that project that I would never have time to work out what the hell I was doing next. And also I'd be so exhausted by it that after it finished, I couldn't even think about starting another one until I'd had a bit of a break. So then I would have these big gaps between the contracts when I'd fallen off the end of one and I hadn't found the next one. And then I'd be sitting at home being like, well, now what do I do? And as I said, I'm very, I'm a busy person. I like to be busy and I procrastinate productively. So that's when I started my blog and that's when I started doing all of this other stuff just as a way to fill the time between the TV contracts. And then it kind of just sort of took on a life of its own.
Okay. Well, Bella, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast and answering all those questions. It's been wonderful chatting with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the SheClicks Women in Photography podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Special thanks to everybody who sent in a question. You'll find links to Bella's social media channels and websites in the show notes. I'll be back with another episode soon, so please subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast platform and tell all your friends and followers about it. You'll also find SheClicks on Facebook, X, Instagram and YouTube if you search for SheClicks Net. So until next time, enjoy your photography.